My name is Daniel, and today I'm going to present my master project, Conceptual Metaphors of Magic in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stones and its Vietnamese translated version. Today's presentation consists of 7 parts: introduction, questions and objectives, theoretical framework, methodology, findings, conclusion, and final implementation and suggestions. Now, for the first part, to conduct the studies, one question is our timeline that what is magic, what has been researched before. And to my surprise, it has been variously researched, and however, within the scope of cognitive research, it hasn't been widely explored. So therefore, that is my momentum for creating the studies. Plus, my studies aims to address the gap left by the previous studies, which is the lack of research for magic as a target domain. And the reason for choosing this book is because the first book in the series of Harry Potter is recognized as the most valuable and has the most influence on today's generation. For the objectives and questions, the research of mine aims to resolve 2 of the main problems. Is that what are the conceptual metaphors are there in the book, and to compare between the English version and the Vietnamese version, like what are the differences and what are the similarities. So as you can tell by the name, the research is grounded in the conceptual metaphor theory of Lakoff and Johnson, where they recognize that metaphor is no longer merely a decoration purposes, but it actually has a way of telling the person's mind, and it is a way of looking into the cognitive patterns of people. So this theory has 3 main key components. So a source domain, a target domain, and a mapping between 2 of these domains, in which you will have to understand abstract concepts in terms of a more concrete ones. And for the methodologies, because I decided to analyze 2 of the books in the Harry Potter series, I think that the best research design has to be corpus-based research design, because it allows us to do a variety of analysis on the vast material. And then for the research method, because I intend to count the frequency of the metaphorical expressions, as well as understand deeply on how it is culturally effective. So I choose both quantitative and qualitative approach. Finally, for data collection analysis, I adapt the metaphor identification procedures, which is a very renowned way of doing the research in conceptual metaphors, which consists of 5 steps. First, you have to read the context, identify its meaning, and check if that meaning contrasts with the ones in the dictionaries, and in order to group and analyze the metaphors. Regarding the findings, first in the English version, as you can see in the chart, there are various conceptual metaphors found, and 3 of the prominent ones are magic as art, as an object, and as a person. So you can see in Harry Potter, readers will have the cognitive mappings between magic and art, magic and object, and magic as person after reading it. And the key insight is that my findings supports the findings from other research, but with different material by Shadova, 2014 and 2019, as well as other researches. But it also proposes some differences, as the other research focus on the danger and vitality of magic. Whereas in my research, you can see magic in here is prominently linked to art instead. And this is the same for the Vietnamese version, the frequency word counts. And as you can see on the screen, there are three main conceptual metaphors found: magic as art, magic as a bullet, and magic as money. These findings also support those mentioned before, and it also proposes some of the differences. And one main key difference here, one main insight here is that my research introduces magic as a bullet conceptual metaphor, which is not really prominently found in previous studies. And this indicates that between the two versions, English and Vietnamese, of the same book, you can see the conceptual metaphor still differs regarding the cultural interpretation or linguistic transfer. And when comparing between the two findings between English and Vietnamese, you can see that there are shared metaphors as seen on the screen: magic as art, as science, as a person, and then as a bullet. So you can see that there are universal cognitive patterns in the mind of the people, even though they do not speak the same language. But there are also various differences. As you can see, various metaphors can only be found in English, and some can only be found in Vietnamese. This suggests that there are cultural influences that may vary the reader's cognitive patterns. And finally, I want to say that in conclusion, my study has identified distinct sets of conceptual metaphors found in the Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone series, both English and Vietnamese. With this, it reveals both shared and culture-specific patterns, and it also reflects underlying cultural and linguistic variations. And for the implication, it can have a profound meaning in academic context. For example, it transforms translation studies methodologies, or it enhances language teaching applications. For practical application, it improves cross-cultural communication and deepens understanding of cultural cognitions. However, there are some limitations. Since my research focused only on the first book of the series, I would like to put up forward a suggestion that the next research can build upon this by focusing on latter books. And also, since this book adopted the MIP procedures, which is although very renowned, but still lacks subjectivity. So I think that in future research, we should avoid these problems by suggesting new methodology. And finally, because there are no readers on translator inputs, I think that this is a very crucial point to improve in the future by giving empirical research, which you collect the reader's thoughts and feedbacks. So that is all for my presentation. Thank you for your engagement, and I welcome the questions about all of the things that I have done in the study. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations on finishing your presentation. And I'd like to invite Dr. Ngô Công Lam to give a review.
Thank you, God, and thank you. Right, so I have a few questions. But other words, like, your interest reached by you believe that there's real magic. Is that real magic? You know? But I really, I think like this students absolutely believe that there is magic. You know? There's no other way. But what the reader, some readers might not believe whether there's magic or not, and it's not even the purpose of the research. When we do research, we investigate problems, we explore problems and how to solve it, or we contribute to the scientific knowledge. Okay, so you need a strong justification for why, and then the gaps. If possible, please clarify the gaps, the specific scientific gaps you are trying to fill in. Not just because you like it or not from you, but what have you read and make you believe there is a gap because you need to do this study. The first question is about why magic. Second is what are the gaps? Okay. And the last question is, the third question is about your findings. Again, it's very descriptive to me. A little effort to explain why. Okay, so you find you present, how English language, magic can be interpreted, right? And then the second section you talk about how the term magic has been translated to the meaning. Okay, but I see little information on the cross comparison and explanation for such differences. You mentioned the difference can be attributed to cultural values occasionally, but that's not enough. Like when you say because of the culture, what specifically is the cultural values that's interpreted differently. Okay. Would be great if you can respond to these three questions.
Regarding the first questions, why magic is important enough to do research upon, I think this is partly subjective to me because I've seen that conceptual metaphors are inspired or created by the human body experience. So what happens if we don't have the body experience with that? Like magic does not exist according to common knowledge. So how do you actually have experience with that to have the conceptual metaphors regarding with magic? And another reason why it is important is that I think it's not really important when you count magic as only one particular domain. But if you do another research with another domain and then you keep adding it up, and as a whole, I think it has a very great importance to the minds of the language learners in English. So I think as a whole it is more important. And for the second question, for the research gap, I acknowledge that my research gap in the research is kind of objective again, because those studies has pointed out that there is a lack of studies on magic as a target domain. However, that is just my observation of the recent studies regarding magic. And finally, for the differences, I also acknowledge that it kind of lacks the deep understanding or deep ways to actually decode why there are those differences. I only guesses, and that is maybe not really good enough. And I acknowledge that, and I think I will try to prove it in the revised version.
Yeah, thanks for your response, which is good. I think when we do research, we also need to think of how to readers, somebody who might share our subjective belief would read it and would see it as a piece of science. Okay, so when we talk about science, we need to clarify what else it contributes. Okay, so I think that's something for you to discuss with the supervisor, for example, and then to make it clearer what are the contributions of the study to the literature. Okay, that's very important. But just out of curiosity, do you believe in real magic? Do you believe in magic?
Sometimes. I think if you say that there are no magic, some individuals might fight that things.
Okay, so you believe in there's some that they're real magic. Okay, just further on, I think curiosity. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed, for your review and questions. And I would like to invite Associate Professor Tandofo, please.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Chair. I have two questions to you, but you can choose to answer, and if you don't want to answer, it's okay. Question one about methodology, and how did you persuade your reader about the designing of the research corpus and your procedure in conducting the corpus-based analysis in your research. Question two, the criteria set in advance for your identifying the metaphorical expressions in Harry Potter and its Vietnamese translated version. Okay?
For how the corpus was designed was manually designed. I personally read through all of the instances where magic is conceptualized in the book, and then I extracted it and create a logical corpus, and then I use the NIP, as mentioned before, as a procedure to identify those who are actually those which are actually conceptual metaphors of magic. And for the second question, sorry, I got a little nervous.
The criteria set in advance for your coding the metaphorical expression in the English version of Harry Potter and its Vietnamese translated version.
Thank you for repeating that. I think that there are, rather than sets of criteria, I just follow procedures by MIP in which I identify words that may seem metaphorical, and then I check its basic meaning to see if it contrasts the contextual meaning. And I think that is the way to do this kind of research, but the criteria is kind of embedded in the procedure already. I think so.
Okay, thank you for the answer. And these are the two major points that should be added to your revision of the research project. At first, in methodology, I don't think you are conducting this research in corpus-based methodology. Because if it is the corpus-based methodology, the way to design the research corpus or research corpora, in case you have the Vietnamese and the English, or the English and the Vietnamese one, but these are not just we mean that the source and the target language only, because the corpus must be consist of several genres of discourse. In this case, you should conduct this in one version, like the Harry Potter in English, and its Vietnamese translated version. These are not the corpus. Okay? The second way is, if it is a method of corpus-based analysis, you have to describe your corpus or your corpora in terms of the size, the content, the representative emphasis of your research. Linking to my question of how to identify metaphorical expression. I mean, you have to encode the metaphorical expression, and the software package will be utilized to pick out the expression of metaphor. These are not presented, or exactly you didn't do anything related to these points in the methodology, so they should be corrected. Okay, and these are just techniques, and if you didn't do it, cross them away. You don't need to continue with the corpus-based methodology. You don't need to continue with adding the software to use to identify the metaphorical expression, blah, blah, blah. You don't need to. But if you plan that these are the corpus-based methodology, you must do this. So it's better to cross out, delete those. Okay? Anyway, it's a good point, and I would like to add some more comments for your satisfactory completion. Apart from the good point in the whole research project, okay? In the abstract of the research project, you should add the key point of finding, the key point related to what you have in your presentation on the slide. Exactly what metaphorical expression found in the English version and the Vietnamese translated version. And I like the point in English only, Vietnamese only. These should be presented right at the beginning in the abstract, so that your reader can see the key point of your finding in the research project. In the sources of citation of metaphorical expression, as illustrated in the 12 tables adopted from several scholars like Kovacs, Laycock, and Johnson, blah, 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 all of the tables. And your reader may think that these are yours, but not the citation. So the table should be in the way that adapted from what scholar. Okay, several scholars in those tables, and I can count 12 tables. The research project is conducted on Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, a book in the Harry Potter series, and is Vietnamese translated version. So again, these are not in the corpus-based methodology, because they are the existing version in English and Vietnamese. They are not the text you collect and compile into the research corpus, one in Vietnamese, one in English, and you have the contrastive analysis of the two research corpora. No. Okay? They are just the existing version of the book. So please delete it. The correction should be made for the deletion of those related to research corpus. Okay? The criteria set in advance before you identify the metaphorical expression should be described. And this is a must in methodology. You didn't do that. So you have to identify the kind of criteria before collecting the data for your analysis. In the English version and the Vietnamese translated version, these should be done. The major point found from the comparative analysis of conceptual metaphors of magic in the English original and the Vietnamese translated version should be presented as the beginning line in the abstract, other than the general plan of the difference in cultural view. This is not the research on culture, okay? It's on linguistic and exactly metaphorical expression. So you have to identify the difference in the metaphor in English version and the Vietnamese version, other than the cultural views. Okay? The strong point here is not cultural view. The strong point is metaphorical expression. Okay, you are English linguistic. Some shortcoming in terms of printing error and word use error should be double checked for your satisfactory completion of the research project. And when such amendments have completely been made, the graduation project can be treated as a good piece of research at postgraduate level, and you is recommended to be granted with a master's degree in English linguistics. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Dr. Phúc, and other members of our committee. Do you have any comments?
Okay, so thank you very much for the presentation. I think I would like to have some comments because this is the topic that I'm very interested in. I have had some studies related to conception metaphor before. So what I'm concerned about is the same as what Dr. Mokamlan is concerned about. That is about the significance of the study. Because this is only about you analyze the conception metaphors of magic in Harry Potter and the Philosophers, right? It's not only one episode of the series of the book, right? Okay, so the significance is not really, cannot be generalized. And so what I recommend is that you can think about the translation strategies that the Vietnamese translator used. Okay, so what strategies did they use to deal with conventional metaphors or novel metaphors? So what strategies do they use? Because there are some metaphors that are novel, that are unusual to Vietnamese speakers, right? We do not use that kind of metaphors in Vietnamese language. So how do they use? What strategies did they use to conquer these metaphors? Okay, so have you ever thought of that? For example, some metaphors that are very novel, okay, to Vietnamese language. So they delete the metaphor. They do not use metaphor at all in the target, version. Okay, so did you see any cases of this? And how did the translator deal with that kind of metaphor?
Thank you for your questions. I think that when conducting the studies, I didn't really kind of forecast it, why factors, the large number of factors that might have to do with the way one conceptual metaphor is translated to another language. So I didn't look really into the translation aspect. So for these questions, I think I would have to do a little more research and then finalize it in the revised version.
Yes, so I think that's a good idea to enhance your study's significance. Okay, and in terms of presentation, as far as I know, normally when we talk about metaphor, conception metaphors, we do not say magic as art. When we say magic is art, but we say us, so that is a simile, it's not metaphor. Okay, so you should pay attention to this. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nguyễn Vĩ Thông and Associate Professor Phương Hoàng Yến. Any comments? No, thank you. So I'd like to answer a very big comment question to you. Why did you choose the translator for your research? And is that person representative of Vietnamese culture?
the translators of the Vietnamese version is Lý Lan. Probably from hearing this name, some of you have already known her. And the reason for choosing this translator because I admired how she can translate the one that is very hard to say in another language, especially Vietnamese, and she still managed to do that. For example, if you had read the Harry Potter series, you would be familiar with the concept of Death Eater. So Death Eater is a person, it is an entity who will suck your soul and then damn you in eternity. And so it roughly translates to it roughly translates to người ăn thịt chết. However, it is very not commonly described in Vietnamese in người ăn and Lý Lan come up with a very creative way of saying Death Eaters, which is the tongue composed. And I think that once alone really tells how much she knows about Vietnamese culture and how to incorporate that into the translated version. I think to answer these questions, I might need to do more research because I think this I haven't even thought about it when talking about the translations of Vietnamese version of Harry Potter. I asked many of the book lovers would think of Lý Lan right away, and so I decided that it must be the translation right without thinking any further, which in hindsight may seem like a flaw in research studies, so I apologize. I also acknowledge that it is one of the major limitations of our research as seen in the slides, and I think that in future research, I think I need to add in any version by other translators or conduct a more empirical research where I ask the reader's opinions or the translator's opinions through interview or questionnaire. Thank you.
Anyway, this is a very illustrious and strong efforts in conducting this research with care and in-depth investigation of the issue, and I try to recommend that you add some further critical analysis about the translator's translation methods, and also whether there are differences or similarities in translation from the source to the target language, whether they are the same conceptual metaphors or not. In this case, I just see the comparison, basically some exist and some do not exist in Vietnamese translation version, but still I can see the differences because sometimes the translator may not translate with the equivalent in Vietnamese because there is no equivalent. So I try to see further about that, and also you need to consider to revise the generalization about the cultural aspects in your discussion. Okay, because Lý Lan is not representative. It is just one version for us to see the similarities or differences in Vietnamese and English in this aspect. So anyway, this is a really good research, and I congratulate you on completing